I want to talk today about the art of starting a conversation because I think it defines a lot of the modern art landscape past maybe what most of us realize. I think so much of the consumption and the sharing and the merit of a lot of contemporary art is in its ability to start conversations rather than aesthetic ability. I should preface right off the bat here, just for clarity's sake, I'm a big fan of this. I really like this. I think it's really cool. I think that there's an argument to be made, an argument that I don't know if I would 100% agree with, but is a valid one nonetheless, that it's harder to start a conversation than it is to make a pretty painting. Because a pretty painting can be trained. I think having an interesting worldview is something that comes with perhaps a more unique touch, right? I think so much of what makes the most technically proficient painters so interesting is not just like, oh wow, they could really make this woman in this painting anatomically correct, and that guy over there is also anatomically correct. And wow, look at the blending and color selection on this painting. Like, I don't think that's why we look at these paintings as masterpieces. I think it's part of it. I think these paintings are beautiful for all those reasons, but I think that the unique voice that these painters had, specifically through the Renaissance, is almost what makes them more interesting. Even if we don't realize it, I think that's so much of what why we're still talking about these paintings today. I actually think that the reason that that's not really a common perspective is because of, you got to teach art, right? Well, not that you have to teach art, but art is taught in so many of these schools. And when you're learning, okay, why is the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel considered to be a masterpiece? Your teacher can't tell you, well, there's a unforetold and almost mystical element to Michelangelo's rejection of this project that leads to it having a certain feeling evoked by it in all that it does, and the historical moment X by Z. You're gonna learn, no, it's beautiful because look, Adam is perfect in this painting and it looks like a brain. Wow, look at that, right? Past that, I would ask, beyond these unquantifiable elements, if that brain wasn't there. I think that brain's a unique choice in the creation of man, in that painting. I think the brain's a very unique choice. If that wasn't there, would we look at the painting as brilliantly? Because I gotta say, for the amount of, you'll see a ton of people online be like, why don't we have any painters doing traditional Renaissance-esque art anymore? There's a ton. There are a ton of old guys doing that. You don't know any of them because it's not interesting. It's almost like if you read every book in the world, you're not gonna be as interesting as you might think. You know what I mean? Like me reading all the books on calculus on Earth will not make me be able to do calculus. You gotta go do it. I think that there's an element of that exists in art. You being able to paint the perfect guy does not make you a good painter outside of the fact that you can paint the perfect guy. I think there are elements to this that are more embraced in just, I guess, the mind of the artist in terms of, can you cause a conversation? Can you make a statement? I think that's a hugely underrated element, and I think that's why I am such a fan of this contemporary style, because I feel that so much of it is cutting into that core. It might have been literally yesterday we were talking about this idea of art moving towards an endpoint, of art being like, okay, someday this will cut to its final form of being the most pure form of expression possible in an abstract sense. And I don't think that modern art's an example of it moving to its pure form of expression by any means. I don't think that this new provocative feature that we see in so much modern art is one of those things. I don't think that it's related to that inherently, but I think you can make a point that it's similar in that it cuts to that core, right? It cuts to this place of no, this is not going to be about you just looking at this painting and being like, wow, look at that. It's going to be about, what do you think? I think there's good and bad parts about this. I think a great example of this that doesn't exist, but is almost like a little thought experiment, is if I stopped here, would this be a painting? Yes, the answer is yes, right? If I stopped one stroke less, would it be a painting? One stroke less, one stroke less, one stroke less, would it still be a painting? The answer, or rather the question, I guess, is not about, is this a good painting? It's, is it a painting at all? And then from there, it leads to you discussing not do you like this painting, but is it a painting at all? And then what is a painting? What is art? And you get to this core eventually that I think is interesting. What's more impressive? Being able to paint something that's like, looks exactly like what's in front of you, or being able to make people question what is art? I think the latter. I think the latter is harder to do. I do. Although I think it was harder to do, I do feel that it's almost getting played out. You know what I mean? Like, how many paintings do we, especially I think this comes from me having like a perspective that's super, like I'm thinking about this stuff all the time. I'm obviously super into this stuff. So like, I can't help but be like, okay, how many paintings do we need about what is a painting before we can all just sit down and have this conversation? You know what I mean? Like, I find that we're at a point where playing with the idea of what is art, I don't know if I'm gonna call it played out, but I've grown a little bit bored with it, I think, because I've talked about it so much. You know what I mean? Now that I'm growing bored of talking about it, I still think there's so much to think about there. I'm growing bored of paintings around the subject, of art around the subject. Although there's the opposite side to that too, of like, the more pieces we have experimenting with this, the more art we have out there to reference in our discussions, the closer we'll get to an answer. So I see the value in it nonetheless. But the point still remains, I see a great degree of impressiveness in being able to cause a conversation like that, right? I think that's what so much modern art's about. The banana is a great example of this, right? It's playing with that idea of like, okay, if you take anything and put it in a museum, does it become art? It's playing with how perception goes into things. And I think like, I would, maybe I'm like kind of stretching this a little bit. I don't know. That's something I always struggle with. What about you guys? I always struggle with like, when are you stretching something? You know what I mean? Like, when is it? Because we all have this perception of like, you'll see this all the time online with like theories about things. People will always go, that's a stretch. At what point does it become a stretch? Again, it's almost similar to that idea of like, one paint stroke is a painting or is it not a painting? At what point does it become a painting? Like, what if you take it a little bit back, a little bit back, a little bit back? Most people will say that it's a stretch when you use less facts and more just like opinion. You're just kind of saying shit, right? But at the same time, what is a stretch in art then when it's all so subjective? But my point here is I think you could make an argument that banana is even talking about or playing with the idea of like, who controls the art world? Will they allow this to be considered art, right? I think there's so much that goes into that piece, because that banana is not supposed to be art in itself. You're not supposed to look at it and go, wow, this is awesome. It's supposed to be a form of performance art, right? Or I guess maybe even dabbling into social experiment in the way it kind of plays with genre, even a little bit of like performance art, experiment. It's clearly a physical piece of art. I think most directly somebody would call it a sculpture, even though that's not accurate by any means. That's not how it functions. I truly believe that is one of the most like vilified pieces of art that is so revolutionary if you think about it. I think there's so much interesting stuff about it. And I think it's so good because it asks this question, what are these museums doing? When I put this in exhibition, what does it become? All these things that lead to super interesting conversations. And this is something I think we should all be doing with our work, is almost like we think so much about how can we make something that looks good, and I think we should all spend more time thinking about like, okay, you as an individual inherently have things that you think that other people will disagree with, right? As you should. I mean, hopefully you got like one hot take, right? We all should. How can you, rather than just saying that, even what I'm doing here is relatively counter to what I'm going to suggest here. But instead of saying it, instead of loading up a camera and making a TikTok where you say this, how can you make a piece of art that within people's own reactions will force a conversation about the subject, will force people to see your side of the hot take? How can you set up a thought experiment within a painting? I think this is cutting to the core of just how to make really interesting art. I think that it's awesome if you can do this. I think it's impressive, and more importantly, I think it's a skill that we all have, even if we don't know it. I think it might take more work to get there, honestly, because not that it's gonna take more work, I think it's gonna take stranger work though, right? Because if I'm like, let's say I'm talking to you and you're a guy with like all the free time in the world, right? And I'm like, I need you to go paint the Mona Lisa for me. Like you're good, you don't have to work for the next couple of years, I just need you to go paint this Mona Lisa. You, as much as you're like, that's an insane task, you will objectively be able to do this eventually. You can 100% go like, okay, I'll learn anatomy, I'll learn how to paint, I'll gather the exact paints that he painted, maybe you'll even trace it. There is a path to get there. There are multiple defined paths to get there that you can take. People have done it before. Multiple people have done it before. When you're asked the question of, take something that you believe that not many people other than you believe, and prove it within a piece of art that doesn't have to look a certain way, doesn't have to feel a certain way, but just has to get your point across, there's no way to get there, right? Like, there's no defined path. So that's why, like, I think maybe it would, it would take you years to learn to paint that Mona Lisa, I think. But I think it's harder to say something in a piece of art, even though it might only take a second, because there's no defined path there. And in my experience, as somebody who I believe very few times in my life has actually said something through pieces of art, right? None here on Paint and Talk, I don't believe. In my life, I think like it's sort of something that just has to come to you. From what I understand about it, like, I think it's kind of just like it has to happen, which is why I guess it's almost an impossible task to give, because there's no one way to do it. But that's why I think it's so powerful. And I think also, as much as I'm going to go counter to what I just said there for a second of like, it's so hard compared to just being a good painter. I'm going to counter that and say I think more people can do it than they expect. Like, I think when given the assignment of take something that you believe that not many other people believe and say it in a piece of art, I think way more people would, if they really sat down and tried to do it, like seriously tried with whatever their process looks like, I think so many more people could do it than you would ever think. Because, like, communication, being unique is something inherent, right? You're born being unique. There's no way for you to not be unique. Like, I think it's almost a complete and utter impossibility to be the same as somebody else. 100%. I mean, we've all met people who we share a lot of beliefs with or have a lot in common with, but to be unique is mandatory. So how can you tell people about that within a piece of art? I don't have the answer, but I just think it's a question we all need to think about more, because I think if you're not causing a conversation, you're probably not making art right now anymore. And I mean, you objectively are making art, but you're not making, art in the colloquial sense of like, this is artistic. You know what I mean. I don't know why I feel the need to defend that. But yes, I think we all should try and cause a conversation. I hate this, guys. This is a new color palette from yesterday. I think I went too far. I think the blue is the only interesting, this is the ugliest thing ever. The brown is just like I mixed 10 different paints. All right, I'm lying. I'm exaggerating here. I mixed 4 different paints to make that brown. 4 paints. And this is the most normal brown. Same with the blue. How many blues did I mix to make this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different blues to make this blue. This is the biggest waste of paint ever in this palette right here. I could have just like ordered this on Amazon. Why is it like Minecraft? I'm stuck. Oh my god, this is literally Steve for Minecraft. crazy that in a paint talk about saying things in your art, I managed to just make the ugliest thing that is the most boring, statementless painting I've ever made. Go follow the Instagram though, because it will be up there one way or another. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint and Talk episode 178. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.